Welcome back to another deep dive, and this week,
We're digging into ADHD.
you guys give us some really interesting sources on this one.
We're talking about how ADHD presents differently in different people, like what those variations even are.
And why there's so much debate about how to even classify it.
So to get us started, we've got the ADHD subtypes.
It's by Megan Anna Neff, who's a neurodivergent clinician, so she's coming at this with a lot of personal experience.
And then we've got this research study.
It's called The Shifting Subtypes of ADHD.
And this one really digs into the weeds on how we define those subtypes and how that actually impacts how many people we even think have them.
Like, it even questions whether our current system is missing people, which is a pretty big deal. It uses these real-life examples to show how a child could end up with totally different diagnoses depending on, like, how their parents' and teachers' observations are,
Analyzed, like
Right.
combined.
Right.
That seems like a big red flag.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what's really important to emphasize here is that this isn't just some abstract academic debate.
This has real world implications for how people are diagnosed, how they're treated, We're talking about the very real possibility that the way we're defining ADHD could lead to misdiagnoses or people not getting the support that they need. And it even makes it difficult to do research.
Because different studies might be using different criteria for these subtypes, so it's like...
It's like we're not even speaking the same language.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like trying to build a house when everybody's got a different blueprint.
Right, exactly. And you end up with something that doesn't quite look like a house.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, let's break down these subtypes that Neff talks about.
We'll start with ADHDI, which is inattentive type.
It used to be called ADD.
And this isn't just daydreaming,
We're
right?
talking about, like, really struggling with focus, organization, even remembering everyday tasks.
Right.
Things that most people take for granted.
Then there's the one that everyone always seems to think of first, ADHDH.
Hyperactive impulsive.
Right.
That's the one you always hear about.
Especially with kids, it's usually the most obvious.
But it's so much more than just fidgeting, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's impulse control, regulating your emotions, even waiting your turn.
Yeah, exactly.
All those things.
And then lastly, we've got the, well, I guess you could say aptly named,
ADHD-C, the combined type.
where you experience both.
Right, exactly.
Inattentive and hyperactive impulsive traits.
It's a bit of both worlds.
And that's actually the most common presentation in children,
It is. It is.
which makes that whole diagnosis question from the study even more important.
Absolutely. And it really highlights why, getting a proper evaluation is so crucial if you think this might be a factor for you or for someone you care about.
It's not a DIY project, right?
Exactly.
You need a professional.
You need someone who knows what they're doing
Right, you need an expert.
to help you figure this out.
It seems like a lot of people still think of these in kind of stereotypical ways,
Like, oh, ADHDI, that's just a daydreamer, and ADHDH, that's just somebody who's, high energy, but
Both of these sources really push back against that, don't they?
they do, and I think that's a really important point to make because it really underscores that we're talking about real differences in how the brain functions.
Both of these subtypes, ADHDI and ADHDH, involve underlying differences in things like executive function, sensory processing, even potentially processing speed.
These aren't just matters of personality or willpower.
And understanding that can be so validating for people with ADHD because it means that
It's like saying, oh, you have asthma, just try harder to breathe.
exactly. Yeah, it's like saying just focus more.
Yeah.
Just try harder. And it's like, well, if I could, I would.
Right, it misses the point.
Right, exactly. It's not that simple.
There's an underlying issue.
Exactly.
That's not being addressed.
Right. And so when we're talking about ADHD, we're talking about real differences in the brain. And these differences
Affect things like executive function, which is kind of like the brain's management system, right?
Right.
It helps us plan, organize, focus, and when that system is a little bit different, it can make those things more challenging.
And then sensory processing, that's how our brain takes in information from the world around us.
And some people with ADHD, their brains might be wired to be more sensitive to certain stimuli, or they might have trouble filtering out distractions.
So again, it's not just a matter of willpower. It's about how their brain is processing information.
So it's like the equipment's different.
Exactly.
It's not that they're not trying.
Right. It's not a matter of effort. It's a matter of their brain is wired a little differently.
And that brings us to why this whole discussion about how we define these subtypes is so important.
It's not just semantics.
No, not at all.
It has real implications for how we understand and treat ADHD.
Absolutely. And the research study that you shared does a great job of illustrating this point.
Because it talks about how the prevalence of certain subtypes can actually change significantly depending on how we use the information that we get from parents and teachers. And they talk about these things called OR rules and AD rules.
Okay, I gotta admit, that sounds a little technical.
Okay.
Can you break that down?
Yeah, so imagine you're trying to figure out if someone meets the criteria for a specific ADHD subtype, right?
Okay.
So OR rules, they're more inclusive.
So if either the parent or the teacher reports a certain number of symptoms, that individual might meet the criteria.
So it's like ordering a pizza.
Okay.
You can have pepperoni or mushrooms,
Exactly.
but you're getting a pizza.
Right, you're getting a pizza either way.
And D rules are more like, I want pepperoni, Andy mushrooms, and extra cheese.
Exactly.
It's a lot more specific.
Right. So Andy rules are much stricter.
They require both the parent and the teacher to report a specific number of symptoms, often with additional criteria.
So if you're using the A&D rule, fewer people are going to meet the criteria for that specific subtype.
Exactly, because you need that agreement from both sources.
And the study actually gives this really good example. So let's say you've got a child and their parent reports 6 inattentive symptoms and 4 hyperactive impulsive symptoms.
Okay.
Their teacher reports 7 inattentive symptoms but only 2 hyperactive impulsive symptoms.
Now, if we're using a specific A&D rule, and this rule says you need at least 6 inattentive symptoms and 4 hyperactive impulsive symptoms from both the parent and the teacher.
Okay.
This child would be classified as ADHD PI, which is predominantly inattentive type.
But what if you use the OR rule?
Right, so with an OR rule, this same child might end up being classified as ADHD-C, the combined type.
Wow, so it's the same kid,
Same child, different label,
different diagnosis based
on how we're choosing to combine that information.
Wow.
And that's why this is such a critical conversation to be having.
Right, because it's subjective in a way.
Exactly. It's not as cut and dry as we might think.
It's not like a blood test
Right, exactly. It's much more nuanced than that.
where it's like, okay, you've got this is the marker, this is what it means.
Exactly. It's not that simple. And I think that's an important takeaway for people to understand.
Yeah, and it speaks to like the importance of finding, like you said, an expert
Well,
who knows what they're doing.
Someone who can really look at the whole picture.
Right, and not just apply these like rigid checklists.
Exactly. Because every individual is unique and their experience with ADHD is going to be unique.
And that's what makes it so complicated, but also so fascinating.
Exactly.
Right.
It is. It's a fascinating area to study.
It's like every case is different,
Absolutely.
even though there are these common threads.
Right. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
You're trying to put all the pieces together,
Yeah.
and every individual has a slightly different puzzle.
And the pieces might even change shape a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a very dynamic process.
Mm.
It really highlights how, this subtypes.
They're really just broad categories.
Right.
And within each one, you've got this huge range of what people actually experience.
Precisely.
Just
Exactly.
like,
You can,
with ADHD PI, for example.
some people might have this thing.
I think they call it sluggish cognitive tempo,
Yeah.
where it's like, that daydreamy mental fogginess,
Right.
like a slow processing speed.
Yeah.
And then others might not.
Exactly.
It's like,
We've got these common threads.
but everybody's experience is going to be unique.
Absolutely.
Like a fingerprint.
It is. It's so important to remember that.
As much as we talk about subtypes, the focus should always be on the individual.
What are their specific strengths and challenges?
What kind of support helps them to thrive? Because that's going to look different for everyone.
Right. And that's where I think
Knowing about the subtypes can be empowering
absolutely
because it helps you like advocate for yourself.
understand your own experience.
Right.
Seek out the right kind of help.
Exactly.
And it brings us back to like
If you think you might have this,
go get evaluated.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't
If you thought you broke your leg, you're not just going to walk it off.
Exactly.
You're going to go to the doc.
Right. You're going to go get it checked out.
Yeah. You get a professional opinion.
Absolutely. And a qualified clinician can really help you make sense of your experiences
Determine if ADHD is even a factor.
and then guide you towards the most appropriate strategies and support.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Like, the more you understand about ADHD,
The better equipped you'll be to navigate those challenges and then also celebrate those strengths that we were just talking about.
Yeah, because there are strengths.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Neff's article talks about,
Each subtype having like its own unique advantages.
she talks about how people with ADHD PI,
Can be like these incredible
creative thinkers,
right.
insightful, like out-of-the-box ideas
Exactly.
that other people might miss.
Because their brains are wired for that innovative thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
They're able to see those connections that other people might overlook.
It's like they have a superpower
It is.
for like brainstorming.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, you've got people with ADHD who can be incredibly energetic, passionate.
Driven individuals, they often excel in those fast-paced environments.
Yeah, like if you can channel that energy
Exactly.
into the right thing.
Think about like entrepreneurs.
Athletes, performers,
Right.
like all of these fields where that drive and that energy can be huge assets.
Huge assets, yeah.
So it's about finding the right fit,
Right. So each one has like
strengths and challenges.
absolutely
And understanding those can be
a
like
game changer.
it is
for both, like the individuals with ADHD.
and the people who are, supporting them.
And it all comes back to that individualized understanding that we were talking about before.
Right.
Because ADHD is not one size fits all.
It's a spectrum.
Right.
And within that spectrum, there is a remarkable amount of diversity.
Yeah, it's like
a kaleidoscope. Every time you turn it, you get a slightly different pattern.
right.
But the underlying elements are the same.
Exactly.
So it's about, I think,
approaching it with curiosity and compassion
absolutely.
and like a willingness to see beyond those
Kind of like surface level.
those assumptions,
Yeah.
those stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think that's a great segue into talking about the future of ADHD.
Okay.
Because if these classifications are so fluid,
Right.
how do you think our understanding of this might evolve?
Could we see a shift toward a more personalized approach
Interesting.
to diagnosis and treatment?
Where it's not even about these broad categories anymore.
Exactly.
Like it's about like what does this look like for you?
Right. What are your unique needs? Because we're already seeing a shift towards personalized medicine in other areas.
Right. Tell you
So
what.
why not ADHD?
Yeah, it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
It's just taking a little longer to get there, maybe.
It might be, but there's some really exciting research happening in this area.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like what?
So some scientists are exploring how things like brain imaging
Okay.
and genetic testing could be used to develop more personalized treatment plans.
Wow.
Imagine a future where your ADHD treatment isn't based on a subtype at all.
But on your unique brain chemistry,
Wow. So it's like, instead of getting
a suit off the rack,
Yes.
you're getting like a custom tailored suit.
Exactly.
That fits you perfectly.
And think about the impact that could have for individuals with ADHD.
Instead of feeling labeled or limited by a particular subtype, they could gain a much deeper understanding of their own unique neurodiversity.
Right. It's not a bad thing.
It's not a deficit,
It's just different.
it's just different.
Yeah.
And allows them to celebrate those strengths.
And then find strategies that truly work for them.
That's amazing.
It's a really hopeful thought, I think.
It is.
And it speaks to the incredible progress that's being made in this field
Right.
and how important it is to stay informed.
Advocate for continued research and support
Absolutely.
for individuals with ADHD.
100%.
Yeah. We've got to keep pushing the boundaries of our understanding.
Yeah, because what we know now is probably going to be
Very different from what we
Yeah,
know
absolutely.
5-10 years from now.
exactly.
Like we're moving away from this like mass production model.
And we're going into
This world of like bespoke tailoring for the brain.
yes.
Which I love that.
It is. It's very exciting. And it actually
It goes back to what we were talking about before about the fluidity of these subtypes.
as our understanding evolves,
Right.
we might even see a shift away from these really rigid classifications altogether.
Towards something that's much more individualized and focuses on.
The specific ways that ADHD shows up in each person.
So instead of saying like, oh, you have ADHD PI.
It's more like,
Right.
here's your unique ADHD profile.
Exactly.
Well, it's based on
Man,
your brain structure.
We're already seeing that starting to happen.
With things like
No.
EEG brain mapping and continuous performance tests, which give us a much more
Right.
detailed and individualized picture of brain function.
So it's like,
We're upgrading from like a
Yes.
magnifying glass to
Like
just like a super high-powered microscope.
yes, a perfect analogy.
And we can see things that maybe
You couldn't see before.
Yeah, because we were able to see those intricacies, those nuances that were always there, but
Maybe we just didn't have the tools to really appreciate before.
yeah, we didn't have the right lens, I guess.
Exactly. And with this more nuanced understanding,
Yeah.
we can then start to develop treatment plans that are truly tailored to the individual.
So it's not, okay,
This is the thing.
it's not a one size fits all.
This is what you take.
Right.
See you later.
Exactly. It might be a combination of things, right? Yeah. It might be medication, therapy, coaching, assistive technologies.
All chosen based on that deeper understanding of that person's unique needs.
It's like working with the brain instead of against it.
Exactly.
I think that-
Because we're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to understand the shape of that peg
Yeah.
and find the right hole for it.
And give them the tools to,
Right.
make it work.
And that actually brings us to another really important aspect of this personalized approach to ADHD,
Okay.
which is empowering individuals to become active participants in their own care.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So instead of just being told,
Here's what you have, here's what you need to do.
right, exactly.
It becomes a collaborative process.
Look, you're part of the team.
You are part of the team, exactly.
You're not just
like you're the expert on you.
yeah, you're not just like the patient being like,
You're not just a passive recipient of treatment.
yeah, given information.
You're actively involved
Yeah.
in making decisions about your own well-being.
I love that.
And I think that's what makes this whole field so hopeful,
Yeah.
is that we are moving away from these outdated assumptions.
We're embracing the incredible diversity of the human brain. It's like, and recognizing that.
We're all different.
Exactly. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing.
That's what makes the world interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that seems like a great place to kind of wrap up.
Our deep dive here on ADHD subtypes.
We covered a lot today.
We did.
We talked about the different subtypes. We talked about how we diagnose it.
How we can understand it better, how we can support people better.
And where things might be headed in the future, which is super exciting.
Very exciting.
So, as always,
We want to hear from you guys.
what resonated with you from today's conversation?
Yes, what are your thoughts?
What questions did this bring up?
What are you curious about?
Share them in the comments below.
We love hearing from you.
Yes, absolutely.
And don't forget to like this episode.
Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our future deep dives.
And we will see you next time.
See you next time.